The doors of the Grand Alien Council chamber opened with a slow, echoing sound. Daniel cross-stepped inside, his boots clicking softly on the shining crystal floor. Above him, the ceiling shimmered with strange lights, almost like an ocean made of stars. He had been sent here as humanity's negotiator, the one chosen to speak for Earth in this historic meeting. This was the moment to end years of tension between humans and the Drakari Empire. The chamber was filled with alien delegates, each wearing their own traditional clothing. Some had skin like polished stone, others had long, glowing hair that floated as if underwater. Daniel walked to the center, trying not to show the weight of 1 billion human lives resting on his shoulders. He had been trained for every kind of diplomacy, except for what was about to happen. His eyes found her. She was taller than him, her skin a smooth silver blue, and her eyes a deep gold that seemed to glow. A long, flowing ceremonial dress of woven light covered her body, shifting colors with every movement. She was Princess Zera of the Drakari, a warrior, a leader, and the most influential voice in this council. Rumors said she could command entire fleets with a single word, and yet, in that moment, her eyes locked on him with an intensity that made him almost forget his mission. Daniel took his seat at the negotiation table, a wide structure carved from living crystal. His translator device buzzed softly in his ear, ready to catch every word. The discussion began. Trade routes, border lines, shared resources, all the careful topics that could bring peace. But each time Daniel looked up, the princess was staring at him. It was not the look of a political rival, nor a hostile enemy. It was something else. He tried to focus on the agreements, on the exact words, but her gaze felt heavier, sharper, as if she was waiting for him to say something he did not understand. Then, without warning, she stood. The room fell silent, every alien delegate turning toward her. Her golden eyes never left his. She walked around the table slowly, her footsteps soft but commanding. The light from the high windows followed her like a spotlight. And then, right in front of him, she reached up, unclasped her ceremonial dress, and let it fall to the floor. A wave of gasps filled the chamber. Daniel froze, his mind racing. Was this an insult? An accident? Her silver blue skin shimmered in the light, covered only by intricate markings that looked like war paint. It was not seductive. It was ceremonial. He could see it now. The patterns told a story, one of victory, honor, and challenge. The princess spoke, her voice clear and calm. The translator whispered in his ear, "You have ignored my courtship rite, human, and so, by our law, you must now prove your worth." Daniel blinked, confused. Courtship? He muttered under his breath. He had studied Drakari trade law, military ranks, political customs, but no one had ever told him about this. Whispers spread across the chamber. Some delegates smirked, others shook their heads. Daniel felt the tension press down on him like a storm. His mission to sign the peace treaty now seemed like a distant dream. If he offended her further, the entire negotiation could collapse. If he accepted, he had no idea what he was agreeing to. The princess stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "By our custom, when a suitor ignores the ritual, they must take the trials," the translator said in his ear. Daniel's throat felt dry. Trials? What kind of trials? He remembered the warning his commander had given him before leaving Earth. The Drakari respect strength, but they worship honor. He looked around the room, seeing every alien eye on him. This was not just about her, it was about the whole council, the whole galaxy watching. If he refused, they would say humans were weak. If he accepted, he might not survive. His mind raced through possibilities. Walk away and the alliance crumbles. Agree. The heavy doors closed behind Daniel with a deep, echoing thud. He was led down a long corridor of dark stone, lit only by thin strips of glowing crystal. The alien guards flanked him on both sides, their armor making a low metallic hum as they walked. Each step away from the council chamber felt like a step deeper into something he was not ready for. The translator in his ear whispered faint fragments of the guard's speech. They spoke in low tones, amused, as if already certain he would fail. Daniel kept his eyes forward, but his mind was running through every possible meaning of the word. Trials. In human history, trials meant tests, competitions, maybe even dangerous missions. But here, on a Drakari world, trials could mean something far worse. The corridor opened into a vast circular room, its walls carved with scenes of battles and hunts. Torches burned with blue flames, casting strange shadows across the stone floor. In the center stood Princess Zera, now wearing a different outfit, light armor that clung to her form, with silver plates over her shoulders and chest. Her hair was braided back, and in her hand she held a long spear with a blade that shimmered like water. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his gaze meeting hers. There was no trace of the strange vulnerability he had seen when she had dropped her dress. Now, she looked every bit the warrior leader. "Human," she said, her voice carrying in the chamber, the translator's voice echoing a moment later in his ear. "You refused my ritual, so you will take the trials, 3 tests to prove your worth." She paced around him as she spoke, the tip of her spear tapping lightly against the floor. "The first trial will test your body, the second will test your mind, the third, your heart." Her words lingered in the air, and Daniel felt the weight of them settle deep inside. 3 trials, and each one could end high. In a different way. "What happens if I pass?" he asked. Zara stopped behind him, her voice lowering. "Then the alliance will stand, and you will earn the right to walk among my people as an equal." She moved to face him again, her eyes narrowing. "But if you fail, your bones will be buried in our sands, and your people will have no place here." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then tell me what I have to do." The princess turned to the guards and spoke in her native tongue. A moment later, the floor beneath them shifted, stone tiles sank away, and from the shadows below, a platform began to rise. The first trial stood revealed, a massive arena made of moving platforms, swinging chains, and pools of dark liquid. The air was filled with the roar of alien creatures locked behind gates, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Zara's voice cut through the noise. "Cross the arena, human, without weapons, without help, and without fear." Daniel stared at the shifting platforms, each one unstable, moving in unpredictable patterns. Between them were the dark pools, where shapes moved just beneath the surface. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that retreat was no longer an option. This was more than a test. It was a performance, one the entire council would hear about. If he looked weak, humanity's reputation would shatter. He stepped onto the first platform, feeling it sway under his weight. Behind him, the gate slammed shut, locking him into the trial. The crowd above began to murmur, their voices a mix of excitement and doubt. The second platform was farther away, forcing him to leap across. As he landed, the surface tilted dangerously, and something in the dark pool below surged upward, a massive, scaled beast with jaws wide open. Daniel jumped to the next platform just as the creature's teeth snapped shut where his legs had been. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to keep moving. The platforms grew more unstable, some spinning, some sinking halfway before rising again. Chains swung above him, and he grabbed one, using his momentum to swing over a gap too wide to jump. Above, Zara watched closely, her golden eyes tracking his every move. He could almost feel her measuring him. Halfway through the arena, one of the gates burst open, releasing a predator unlike anything he had seen. Tall, with 6 legs and a head full of sharp, glistening teeth, it leapt from platform to platform, chasing him. Daniel didn't run, he waited until it jumped, then rolled aside, letting it crash into the dark pool. The water swallowed it whole, the surface closing as if nothing had happened. With one last jump, Daniel reached the final platform, pulling himself up onto the safety of the stone edge. The arena fell silent, the only sound his heavy breathing. Zara stepped forward, her voice calm. "You survived the first trial, human, but your real test has only just begun." The arena floor rumbled as hidden gates slid shut. Daniel stood in the center, still catching his breath from the first trial. Above him, alien voices murmured, some impressed, others disappointed that the human had not fallen. Princess Zara's golden eyes never left him. She lifted her spear and pointed toward a tall, dark doorway at the far end of the chamber. "The second trial awaits," the translator whispered in his ear. "This will test your mind, your will, and the truth inside you." Daniel stepped toward the doorway, unsure of what to expect. He could face monsters, traps, and weapons, but this felt different. Something about her tone told him the danger here was not something he could fight with his hands. The doorway led into a long, narrow tunnel carved from black stone. The air inside was still, almost heavy, and the walls seemed to swallow the torchlight. His footsteps echoed softly, and then the sound began to change. Instead of one echo, he now heard 2 sets of steps. He spun around, but the tunnel behind him was empty. A faint hum filled his ears, like a distant voice speaking underwater. He stepped forward, and the tunnel opened into a circular chamber lined with tall mirrors. Each mirror was made of a strange, rippling glass that distorted his reflection. In one, he saw himself wearing alien armor, standing on a pile of bones. In another, he was old, broken, and forgotten. He moved past them quickly, refusing to look for too long. Then the mirrors began to change now. They showed people he knew, his crew, his friends back on Earth. In one mirror, his crew lay dead on a battlefield. In another, Earth cities burned under alien warships. The images struck him harder than any weapon could. A cold voice spoke from somewhere in the room. "These are the futures you will cause if you fail." The translator whispered the meaning in his ear. Daniel clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He knew this was some kind of psychological attack, a way to break him, but the images kept shifting, becoming more personal. He saw himself as a child, watching his father's casket lower into the ground. He saw his mother, struggling alone, and then, he saw Princess Zara, standing in her ceremonial dress. But this time her eyes were filled with disappointment. The voice spoke again, deeper now. "To pass, you must face the truth you fear most." The mirrors shifted one final time, and Daniel saw himself, not fighting, not leading, but running away. Cowardice, that was his deepest fear. Not death, not pain, but failing when people needed him most. The room began to close in, the mirrors drawing closer, the voices louder. He shut his eyes, forcing himself to remember Earth's oceans, the sound of rain on a rooftop. He remembered the faces of the people he was here to protect. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes. "I am not afraid of what I have been," he ate slowly, "because I know who I am now." The mirrors shattered at once, the sound ringing like 1,000 bells. The darkness lifted, and he found himself standing once again in the arena. The alien crowd was silent, waiting for Zara's judgment. She stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "You saw what could break you," she said, her tone softer than before, "and you did not let it." Daniel simply nodded, too drained to speak, but inside, he felt something shift. This trial had not just been about her culture's honor, it had been about showing her what kind of human he truly was. And from the faint glimmer in her eyes, he knew she was beginning to see it. "Rest, human," she said finally, "for tomorrow comes the third trial, the one that will decide everything." The morning came with the sound of drums echoing through the alien city. Daniel stood at the edge of a wide, open arena, its floor made of polished black stone that shimmered under the alien sun. Around the high walls, thousands of Drakari citizens filled the stands, their voices blending into a low, expectant hum. He could feel every eye on him. Today was the third trial, the warrior's path. Princess Zara stood across from him, dressed in full ceremonial battle armor. Silver plates covered her shoulders and chest, engraved with the history of her victories. Her spear gleamed in the light, the blade shaped like a crescent moon, but her expression was calm, not hostile. "The warrior's path is not only about strength," her voice rang out, the translator repeating her words in his ear. "It is about proving you can stand as my equal." Daniel stepped forward, the weight of the moment settling over him. He had expected an opponent, perhaps one of her guards, perhaps a champion chosen to kill him, but now he realized she meant herself. He was to fight the princess, in front of her people, and somehow win without dishonoring her. A deep horn sounded, and she moved first. Zara's spear shot forward with blinding speed, forcing him to step back. He barely avoided the strike, the blade slicing a line through the air just inches from his chest. Her movements were fluid, like a dancer, each strike precise and full of intent. She was not holding back, and he understood why. To win her respect, he had to show his full strength. He dodged and countered, using speed over power. Without a weapon, he relied on his reflexes, grabbing the shaft of her spear when it came too close, but she twisted, pulling it free, her eyes flashing with something that looked almost like approval. The crowd roared as the fight quickened, their voices rising with every exchange. Then, mid-strike, Daniel noticed something strange. Two figures had appeared in the high stands, dressed in dark cloaks. Their hands moved in subtle signals towards Zara. Daniel's instinct screamed that something was wrong, and then he saw it. A thin dart, glinting in the sunlight, aimed at her back. Without thinking, he stepped into her attack, letting the spear graze his side as he grabbed her arm and spun her around. The dart flew past, striking the stone floor where she had been standing. It hissed, burning a hole through the black stone. The crowd gasped. Guards rushed toward the stands as the cloaked figures tried to flee. Zara's eyes widened for the briefest moment. She had not expected this. Daniel straightened, breathing hard. "Looks like this fight isn't your real problem," he said. The translator's voice echoed the words, and the crowd erupted in shouts. The princess raised her hand, calling the fight to a halt. She looked at Daniel for a long moment, then turned to the council members seated in the high box. You see him as an outsider, she said to them, her voice carrying through the arena, but he just saved your future ruler from an assassin's blade. The council chamber guards dragged the captured figures forward. They are hoods pulled back to reveal rival nobles. The betrayal was clear. Someone had wanted the trials to end with Zara's death and humanity's failure. Daniel realized then that the courtship ritual, the trials, all of it, had been more than tradition. It had been a way to judge his place in a political game much older and deadlier than he knew. Zara stepped close to him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. You had the chance to defeat me, she said, but instead, you protected me. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, respect, and perhaps something more. The warrior's path is complete, she said aloud. The crowd roared in approval, their voices shaking the arena walls. Daniel knew the trials were not over. Not truly. Saving her had made him an ally, but it had also made him a target, and somewhere, beyond the noise of the arena, he could feel the shadow of the final test beginning to move. The arena was still echoing with cheers when Daniel was led back into the Grand Council Hall, but the mood inside was very different. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Council members sat in a semicircle, their eyes sharp and unreadable. Princess Zara stood beside him, her armor gone, replaced with a regal robe of deep crimson. This was no longer about combat, this was politics, and politics here was war without weapons. A tall council elder stepped forward, his voice deep and slow. Human Daniel Cross, the translator whispered into his ear. You have passed the trials of body, mind, and warrior's path. A murmur ran through the chamber, but the elder raised a hand, silencing them. However, the alliance between Earth and the Dracari is not yet sealed. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought the trials were the last step, but now he could see from the cold smiles of certain council members that this was a new game. The elder turned to Zara. Our law states that the one who completes the trials must choose, bind themselves to our people, or return to their world empty-handed. The words hit Daniel harder than any spear. Binding himself meant accepting her as his bondmate. It would mean living on her world, becoming part of her court. It would also mean Earth's place in the alliance would be secure forever, but walking away would mean war was certain. The council watched him closely, some hoping he would refuse, others waiting to see if the human had the courage to surrender his freedom for peace. Zara's gaze met his, calm but searching. She did not speak, did not try to sway him, but her eyes told him she understood exactly what this meant for him. Daniel's mind raced. He thought of Earth, its cities, its people, his crew still waiting in orbit. He thought of the assassin's dart, of the political enemies that wanted this treaty to fail, and he realized something. This choice was not just about him or her, it was about showing the galaxy what kind of people humans were. He stepped forward, his voice steady. If I bind myself to you, the treaty holds, and Earth is safe. The translator carried his words into every corner of the chamber. Then my answer is yes. A shockwave of murmurs and gasps filled the hall. Some council members looked furious, others stunned. Zara's expression didn't change, but a faint flicker passed through her eyes, something between pride and relief. The elder nodded slowly. Then, human, your place here is set. But before the moment could settle, the doors burst open. A guard rushed in, bowing quickly. Princess, he said in Dracari, the translator rushing to keep up. Enemy fleets have crossed the border. Someone has already moved against the alliance. The council erupted into shouts. Daniel's choice had been made, but now the enemy was coming. Zara turned to him, her voice quiet but fierce. Your trials may be over, Daniel C. Ross, she said, but the real test is about to begin. The elder struck his staff against the floor, calling for order, but Daniel barely heard it. His heart was already set. If war was coming, he was no longer just humanity's negotiator, he was bound to the Dracari princess, and that meant standing beside her in whatever came next. The war alarms echoed through the Dracari capital like a heartbeat of steel. Red light swept across the council hall walls, casting long, sharp shadows. Daniel barely had time to exchange a glance with Princess Zara before the guards ushered them both toward the command chamber. The air tasted metallic, heavy with the smell of powered weapons warming up. When they entered, the command room was a storm of motion. Officers barked orders, holographic maps flickered with enemy fleet positions, the stars on the display swarmed with red markers, a large sector at the border had already turned crimson. The enemy had crossed in full force. Daniel recognized the formation instantly. That's not a raid, he said under his breath. That's an invasion. Zara stood at the central table, her hands gripping the edge. Confirm. Their numbers, she ordered, her voice cold. An officer replied in Dracari, the translator feeding the words to Daniel. 3 battle fleets, at least 1 dreadnought, moving directly toward the capital system. The council had wanted him to prove himself, but now the galaxy itself was demanding it. Daniel stepped closer to the tactical display. Your ships will hold them at the second moon, he said, pointing to a cluster of icons. Zara's eyes narrowed. That's not our plan, she said. Daniel shook his head. It should be. If you meet them head-on, you'll lose half your fleet before they even reach firing range. The room went silent for a heartbeat. A human telling the Dracari how to fight was dangerous, an insult to some, but Zara didn't dismiss him. Show me, she said simply. Daniel's fingers danced across the control surface. We let them think you're falling back. He explained, pull their leading ships into this narrow arc here, then close it with your fastest strike wings. He looked up at her. You've got weapons built for speed and precision, not slugging matches. Use them where it counts. For a moment, Zara only studied him, then she turned to her officers. Prepare the fleet as he says, she ordered. A few muttered protests rose, but her voice cut them down like a blade. Do it. The next hours moved in a blur. Daniel stood beside her on the bridge of the VA ferry, the flagship of the Dracari defense fleet. The view beyond the forward screens was filled with stars and the glint of enemy ships advancing. Every vibration of the deck beneath his boots reminded him this was no simulation. One mistake here, and both their peoples could burn. The enemy fell into the trap exactly as planned. Their lead ships pressed forward, overconfident. The Dracari feigned retreat, luring them deeper into the kill zone, and then, with Zara's sharp command, the hidden strike wings burst from the shadow of the moon. Fast, angular fighters tore through the enemy formation, disabling key ships before they could react. Daniel's chest tightened as he saw the shift. The enemy formation began to crumble, but then the dreadnought moved forward. Its massive guns lit up the void, sending lances of energy straight toward the flagship. Shields at maximum, Zara shouted. The deck shook violently as the first shot slammed into them. A second hit followed, nearly throwing Daniel to the floor. Warning lights blazed across the bridge. Direct hit to the port engines. An officer called out, if we lose propulsion, we're finished. Daniel's mind worked fast. Bring us closer, he said. Zara turned to him, almost incredulous. Closer? Yes, he said, their guns are too big to target us at point-blank range. They'll have to switch to secondary weapons, and they won't be ready for that speed. Without hesitation, she gave the order. The VA ferry roared forward, skimming so close to the dreadnought's hull that Daniel could see the seams in its armor plating. The ship's gunners fired in a blistering storm, hammering weak points along the enemy's main weapon array. Explosions rippled across the dreadnought's spine, its lights flickered and died. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Daniel didn't relax. Zara's voice was calm but certain. The battle is not over, she said, but today, you've shown my people something they never thought possible. Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. You've shown them what it means to fight like a human. The enemy fleet was in retreat, their ships vanishing into the darkness between the stars, but the Dracari capital was still buzzing with the electric hum of war. The air outside the palace carried the metallic tang of burned metal from the shipyards. Daniel walked beside Princess Zara through the long, arched corridors, their footsteps echoing together, steady and in rhythm. The council chamber doors opened slowly. Inside, the great hall was packed, not just with council members, but with warriors, officers, and civilians. News of the battle had spread faster than light. They all knew the human had fought beside their princess, and many had come to see what would happen next. Council Elder Varek stood at the center, his gaze sharp. The enemy has been repelled, the translator whispered in Daniel's ear, but their attack proved what some of us have long feared. This galaxy is changing. His eyes shifted to Daniel, and it will be shaped by those who dare to stand together. A table was brought forward, carved from the same living crystal as the council floor, Yupo. And it lay the treaty, glowing softly with embedded symbols. Daniel knew this was more than a signature. It was a binding pact, recognized by the galaxy's oldest laws. Zara stepped forward, her voice carrying through the chamber. this human came to speak for his people, but he has fought for mine. She turned her gaze to the crowd. He has passed our trials, not as a stranger, but as one of us. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep inside him. He thought of the trials, the arena beasts, the psychic labyrinth, the dual-turned assassination attempt. Every step had brought him closer to this moment, and now the choice he had made to bind himself to her world no longer felt like sacrifice, it felt like purpose. The elder gestured for him to sign. Daniel picked up the stylus, its metal warm from the hands of countless rulers before him. He wrote his name in human letters first, then in the flowing marks of the Drakari script he had practiced the night before. As the last mark burned into the crystal, the hall erupted in a sound like a tidal wave. Cheers, roars, the stamping of feet. But even in that victory, Daniel noticed Zara's eyes flick toward the shadowed edges of the chamber. She leaned closer, speaking so only he could hear. "This treaty will hold for now," she said, "but the enemies who tried to kill me have not gone. They will wait, and they will strike again." He nodded. "Then we'll be ready," he replied. There was no hesitation in his voice. This was no longer just her fight. It was theirs. As they turned to face the cheering crowd, a messenger hurried in. Bowing deeply, he carried a sealed datapad marked with the insignia of the Galactic Council. Zara broke the seal, scanning the message quickly before passing it to Daniel. It was short, but its meaning was clear. The Galactic Council was calling an emergency summit, and humans had been invited. For the first time in history, the roar of the crowd grew louder. Daniel looked at Zara. "You think they're ready for us?" he asked, a hint of a smile on his lips. She returned the smile, faint but certain. "No," she said, "but that's exactly why we're going." They walked from the hall together, side by side. The world outside was still scarred from battle, but the path ahead was lit with the promise of something greater. In the silence between their steps, Daniel realized the truth. The trials had begun as a courtship ritual, a strange alien tradition he had stumbled into, but they had ended as the foundation of an alliance that could shake the stars. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any treaty, the enemies who had failed to kill them watched from the shadows, waiting for their chance. But for now, the galaxy would remember this day, the day a human and a Drakari princess stood together, and the stars themselves seemed to bow.